Hello friends, so let us talk about the evaluation technique. So basically, what is evaluations? So before talking to a technique, we'll study what is evaluation first. So evaluation is not simple as thought a single phase in a design process. Evaluation is occur throughout the design of life cycle because the requirements is evaluated, your design is evaluated, and so on. So, like with the results of evaluation feeding back, like feedback into modifications into the design. So, it is not usually possible to perform extensive experimental testing continuously throughout the design. Certain like techniques help to ensure that the design is assessed continually. Now, this has the advantage that problem can be ironed out before considerable efforts and resources have been expended on the implementation itself. The former is particularly useful for assessing early designs and prototypes. So we'll see about the goal of the evaluations. Now, goal of the evaluation is the evaluation has three main goals: to assess the extent and accessibility of the system functionality, to access user experience of the interaction, and to identify any specific problem with the system. So the system functionality is important in that it must accord to the user expectations requirements. So in other words, it can be a design of the system should enable users to perform the intended task more easily, and this will help include on not only making the appropriate function available within the system, but it will be reachable in terms of user action that user need to perform the task. So it will indirectly it will be satisfied or satisfaction cause, or it could be the expectation meets of the requirements. For example, if filing a clerk is used to retrieve a customer file by the postal address. So same capability should be provided to the computerized file system. Now, in addition to evaluating system design in terms of functional capabilities, it is important to assess the user experience of the interaction and its impact upon the system. So this includes considering aspects that how the case is how the case is been solved. Then how it is usability and the user satisfaction with it. It may also include its enjoyment and emotional response, particularly in case of the systems are aimed at leisure or entertainment. Then the final goal of the evaluation is to identify the specific problems with the design. So this may be the aspects of the design which, when used in their intended context, cause unexpected results or confusing among the users. So this is like usability of the design, like depending on the cause of the problem. Then next is the evaluation through expert analysis. This in particular, the first evaluation of system should ideally be performed before any implementation work has started. So if the design itself can be evaluated, expensive mistakes can be avoided. Now, it can be expensive to carry out user testing at regular intervals during the design process, and it could be difficult to get into the accurate assessment of the experience of interactions from incomplete design and prototypes. Then, the basic intention is to identify any areas that are likely to cause difficulty because they violate known cognitive principle or ignore accepted empirical results. So, there are four approaches or four methodologies to the expert analysis. One is cognitive walkthrough, heuristic evaluation, use of models, and previous work. So let us see about cognitive walkthrough. So it was proposed later, and it was an attempt to introduce the psychological theory into the formal and subjective walkthrough technique. So the origin of the cognitive walkthrough approach to evaluation is the code walking through, similar in software engineering. It's a code walkthrough. Now, code walkthrough requires a detailed review of the sequence of actions. So in a code walkthrough, the sequence represents like viewers are there, the authors, the inspectors, the audience, and they have a review process. In a cognitive walkthrough, the sequence of action refers to the steps that will interface, and they will require a user to perform in order to accomplish some own task. Now, The evaluators then step through the action sequence to check if the potential usability problem has occurred or not. So we need four things, that is a specification or prototype of the system, and it doesn't have to be complete because we are using a prototype. A description of the task of the user to perform the system. So this should be a representative task, a complete written test of the actions needed to complete the task, and indication to the users and what kind of experience and knowledge is required. Then to answer this is they have the following four questions for each step in the action sequence. Like is the effect of the action of the same as the user goal at this point? Will user see the actions is available and so on? Then you have a later part. Like usually main focus is cognitive is to establish a new system is like how to learn. Then heuristic evaluations. Heuristic evaluation is a guideline or a general principle that can guide a design or decision or be used as a critic a decision that has already been made. So heuristic evaluation is a method for structuring the critic of a system. It can be performed on a design specification, so it's useful for evaluating your early design. That means when you create your prototype, based on your prototypes, your storyboards on full functioning system, it is flexible, relatively, and a cheap process. But main idea is that several evaluators independently criticize the system to come up with potential usability problems. It is important that the several of the evaluators and the evaluations be done independently. Then you have a model based evaluation. So a model based evaluation is a third expert approach for the use of the models. Like cognitive design and design model provides a meaning of combining design specifications and evaluating into the same framework. So it is like goal, operator, methods, and selection. Now, design methodologies such as design rationality that we have seen also have a role to play in an evaluation as a design stage. So design rationally provides a framework in which design options can be evaluated. So by examining the criteria that are associated with each option in the design and the evidence that is supported to provide these criteria. Now, dialogue models can be used to evaluate the dialogue sequence for problems. When models such as state transition network that helps to understand the previous or from previous to current or from former to a later stage, so with the dialogues involving and so on. Then you have using previous studies in evaluation. So this is a final approach to the expert evaluation which exploit this inheritance. Using your previous result as evidence aspects of the design. It is expensive to repeat your experiments continually. An expert review of relevant literature can avoid. It should be noted that the experimental results can be expected to hold an arbitrary across contexts. For example, an experiment testing the usability of particular style of health system with using by a amateur participant may not provide an accurate evaluation for the health system design for expert user. Then you have evaluation through user participations. Like user participation is useful as these techniques are more filtering and refining the design. They are not replacement for actual usability testing with the people for whom the system is intended. So user participation is evaluations tends to occur in the later stage of development where there is a list of working prototype of the system in place. Then there is a they have a style of evaluation. You have a laboratory studies. So in labs, when you make the experiments, you think of the results, the outcome. So users are taken off the normal work environment as a part of a controlled test in an environment. Okay. So especially specialist usability laboratory, that is lab. So a well-equipped usability lab may contain sophisticated audio and visual recording and analysis facilities, a two-way mirror, instrumented computers, and the like. So This they have walls, filing cabinets. So lack of context, for example, filing cabinets, wall, calendar, books, or interruptions, and unnatural situation may mean that accurately record a situation that may arise. Then you have a field studies. So second type of evaluation takes the designer or evaluator out into the user's work environment, outside to the work environment, in order to observe the system and actions. Now when my system is ready, I want to see what outside outside environment, to see whether how my system is reacting or it's triggering with the actions. So high level ambient noise, greater level of movement, constant interruptions such as phone call, all make field observation difficult. So however, their open nature of the situation means that you will observe the interaction between the system and between the individual that may have to miss the laboratory study. Then you have empirical methods like experimental evaluations. Then it is like methods of evaluating a design or aspects of the design is to use a control experiment. So any experiment that has a same basic form, the evaluator chooses a hypothesis to test, that means which can be determined by measuring some attribute of participant behavior. The number of experimental conditions are considered which differ only in the values or in a certain control variables. So, this include the participants chosen the variable, the test and manipulated, and the hypothesis tested. Then, this evaluations has participants. Now, the choice of the participants is vital in the success of any experiment. So, in evaluation experiments, participations could be chosen to match the expected user population as closely as possible. A second issue is relating to the participant sets is simple sample size chosen. Often there is something that is determined by paradigmatic consideration. The availability of the participation is limited or resources are scarce, a few resources available. So certainly if the intention is to run a control experiment and perform a statistical analysis on the result, so twice number is recommended. Then you have a variables. Now experiments manipulate and measures under variables under the controlled conditions in order to test the hypothesis. So there are main two types of variables that are manipulated or changed. That is independent variables, and those are measured is called as dependent. The independent variables are those that elements of these experiments that are manipulated produce different conditions for comparison. Now, example of independent variables is evaluation experience. Experiments are interface style, level of help, number of menu, and icon design. So each of these variable can be given a different values. Such values that is used in an experiment is known as level of the variables. Then you have hypothesis. So it is a prediction of the outcome of an experiment. It is framed in terms of the independent and variable dependent variable. So stating that is a variation in independent variable, it will cause a difference in the in the dependent variable. The aim of the experiment is to show that prediction is correct. So this is done by disapproving the null hypothesis. Then you have experimental design. So, in order to produce the reliable and generable results, an experiment must be carefully designed. Now, we have the first phase is experimental design, then is to choose the hypothesis. So, to decide exactly what we are trying to demonstrate. So, in doing this, we are likely to clarify the independent and dependent variable in that will be identified what you're going to manipulate, what you're going to be operated. So on these variables, the values which are going to be changed. So this they should noted this. So next step is to identify to decide whether experimental method you will see they are between subjects and within the subjects. Then you have a statistical measures. So statistical measures gives you the idea of the single data items that are different from the rest. The outliers are we investigated and discovered that the participant had been suffering from the flu on the day of experiment. So if the participant data were included, it would be the bias the result. So saving the data is important as we may later want to try a different analysis. So in particular, looking at the data, we can expose the outliers, a single data item that are different from the rest. Then next is observation technique, studies of users group. So next is about your users, defining your users, study of your users group, like what type of users are use this system, and how they will use, what they actually want, is this for these users, and so on. So like their participant group, to organize, say there are 10 experiments on a single group, noted. So single user system requires 10 participants, and for every experiment involves groups of 3, so we will have a course with 30 participants from the same experiments. So, in addition, experiments in group working are often longer than the single user equivalent, as we must allow time for the group to settle down. So, the experiment task is like choosing a suitable task, which is also difficult. So, we want to test a variety of different types like creative, structured, information passing, and so on. And creative tasks are such as write a short report on or write a research proposal. Then we have a data gathering. So on basis of your data gathering analysis, we create the reports. And the later is a field studies with the group. So in this way, we create a report and we study the outcome of the experiments. Then we have the observational techniques. Like observational technique is uh, think they are observational technique, like evaluator watches and records the user actions. So they are the certain techniques that are proposed, like think aloud and cooperative evaluation. The first is, this is the where the user is asked to talk through what he is doing or what he's been observed. For example, describing what he believes in happening. So why he takes an action, what he's trying to do. So think aloud and has that advantage of simplicity. It requires little expertise to perform and can provide a fully insight problems. A variation of think aloud is cooperative evaluations. So it has the advantage like a process is less constrained and therefore easier to learn to use by evaluator. The user is encouraged to criticize the system. The evaluator can clarify points of confusion at the time they occur and so maximize the effectiveness of the approach of the problem. Then they have a protocol evaluations. So paper and pencil is primitive but cheap and allows the analyst to note down. Then they have audio recording. This is useful if the user is actively thinking loud. Video recording. This is the advantage if what we can see what the participant is doing as long as participant stays within the range of camera. Then choosing a suitable camera position and viewing angle, we can identify, we can relate that what the user wants to convey. Then computer logging, by logging to the computer and leaving feedback or comment, we can know that direct logging has the advantage and it's cheap in the test storage. So using user notebooks. So in practice, one use of mixture of recording method as they complement one another. This can be a protocol evaluation. Then you have a automatic protocol analysis tool. So EVA is experimental video annotator, is a system that runs on multimedia workstation with a direct link to a video recorder. The evaluator can devise a set of buttons indicating different events. This may include timestamps and snapshots as well as notes of expected events and errors. So the evaluator used the multimedia workstation running EVA. The workspace also includes a system to help to for protocol analysis. So the main emphasis here is here to support the analysis of synchronous information from different data streams such as video, audio, notes, and diagrams. Then you have a post task walkthrough. So often data is obtained via direct observation lag interpretations. A walkthrough attempts to evaluate this problem by reflecting participation action back to them after the event. The transcript, whether written or recorded, is replayed to the participant who is invited to comment or is directly questioned by the analyst. So there are some circumstances whether the participant cannot be expected to talk during the actual observation. For instance, during a critical task when the task is too intensive. The next evaluation is factors distinguish evaluation techniques. Then we have a design versus implementations. This means that how design is one and the implementation the other two factors, but how they can be contradictory. Even though when the design is done, so when the later part, the implementation part, when comes into the picture, how design gets changed or uh, how it happens, like implementation can can be easily be converted, or sometimes it happens like what the design has passed, when I want to do the implementation work I feel like no, this will not make sense, I will change it. So this can be the factors. It can distinguish your evaluation technique. So first is a design versus implementation. Let's talk about. So as I said, the first factor is to affect our choice of evaluation method. So it's speaking, evaluation is at the design stage need to be quick and cheap. So it might involve design experts not only be analytic but evaluation of the implementation being more comprehensive. Then laboratory versus the field studies. We have seen the laboratory and field studies how they contradict with each other. Laboratory is one is a controlled field and this field studies is an open one. So how does ideally the design process should be include both style of evaluation probably with the laboratory studies, so subjective versus objective. Then evaluation technique can also vary according to the objectivity. Some techniques rely heavily on the interpretations of the evaluator. The objective technique, on the other hand, should produce repeatable results which are not dependent on the persuasions of the particular evaluator. Control experiments are the example of objective measure. Quantitative versus qualitative. The type of measurement provided by the evaluation technique is also important. So there is quantitative measurement and qualitative measurements. So former is usually numeric and can be easily analyzed using a statistical technique. The latter is not numeric and is therefore more difficult to analyze but can provide important detail which cannot be determined with numbers. Then information provided. The level of information required from one evaluation may also vary. So the information required by an evaluator at any stage of the design process may range from low level to enable to decision can be made. Then immediacy of response. So this method such as think loud record to the user behavior at time of interaction itself. About the post talks, a post task walkthrough rely on the user collections of events. Such collections are liable to suffer from the bias in recall and reconstruction with user interpretation. Intrusiveness. It depends. It is related to the immediacy of the response in the intrusiveness of the technique itself. Certain techniques, particularly those that produce immediate measurements, are obvious to the user doing the interaction and therefore run the risk of influencing. Then the final word is resource. So resource, how it plays an important role in availability of resource. Resource to consider including the equipment, time, money, participants, expertise of evaluator and context. So some decisions are forced by the resource limitations. Some techniques are more reliant on evaluator expertise. So choosing an evaluations method. Now we have finished with the choosing of the evaluation method. Now we'll see about the universal design till next session. Till then, bye.